shocked at anything. You know what I'm saying? But I wasn't more shocked of him dying. I was more shocked.
Let me present an alternative. Okay. Just 1 second, because yes, I agree.
I'm restraining myself.
I agree that everything's going to go digital, but I want to make a point that there are alternatives to big oligarchs. There's something besides big oligarchs and internet blogs or newspapers, and that is what Bob McChesney, founder of Free Press, and John Nichols, who writes for The Nation, talked about in their book, Death and Life of American Journalism. They said there are 3 ways that media should be financed. One would be public subsidies, which we have a history of in this country going back to the 1700s. Journalism was first done through the mail. So the post office has always been subsidized until now, of course, the Republicans are trying to kill it off.
Good luck with that.
And, public television, which is getting less and less money from government. So the trend is not in that direction for that choice of theirs. The other is these quasi-nonprofit organizations that I think Broad and Buettner are trying to set up. And if they were to have an editorial board made up of key members of the community representing different segments, that could be a really viable option. And the third, of course, is worker and community
cooperatives?
Worker-owned and community-owned cooperatives, yes. And believe it or not, there is a campaign right now to raise $660 million to buy these papers. And that has been set up by the other 98%. And within 1 week, they raised $130,000. And they have 3 weeks to go. Now, obviously, they're not going to raise the money, but can you imagine if everybody promoted this campaign, if all the nonprofits in the coalition to stop the Koch brothers were to promote that campaign to their membership and it were to spread virally, this could really be doable.
Well, I think at the end of the day, when you talk about bridging the divide from digital media to print, how do we make digital profitable? I think that a lot of what print media is doing is like straddling the fence. It's like, oh, we'll give out all this free media.
Right, but how about making digital media in the future credible? The problem is that that people surf on the internet and you get all kinds of unsourced opinions. There is no journalistic standard, at least the New York Times and to a lesser extent the LA Times, since it was looted by Sam Zell, at least give you some kind of connection to reality. The real challenge in America is that there's no consensus anymore about what is real. You have people, a third of the country, believing that the dinosaurs are on Noah's Ark. You have a half of the country, or at least a third, thinking that Obama is a Muslim imposter with a fake birth certificate. There's a real problem in just having a consensus about what's real anymore. So how do you establish a basic foundation of what is happening in the real world versus everybody's opinion and every blogger's opinion on the internet, where you have unlimited choice,
right,
but no clarity and little credibility?
The New York Times and the LA Times, they both have digital online presence. They do have paywalls in certain circumstances. But if you're giving away the milk, why buy the cow?
But all where do you start with
how
that?
do you?
Where do you start with what is real and what is not?
Politico started.
I'm talking about the source of a story. How do you begin with accepting the basic premises of what's happening anywhere in the world?
I would like to say.
Let me clarify though. When I say print media, traditional media, I'm not saying that New York Times and LA Times aren't digital. What I'm saying is, how do we make these traditional media outlets profitable, whether or not they're in print form or digital form?
Yeah, but I'm saying credibility is more important than profit. I mean, we have a bigger problem, which is that we don't, in the information age, we have bogus information coming out.
But the LA Times and the New York Times both, the reason that we're lacking so much information is because they're unprofitable, or I shouldn't say they're unprofitable, but they've been hemorrhaging money. They've laid off staffs in order to retain profitability, in order to survive. It's not like the LA Times is healthy before this. It's not like the New York Times is healthy. They are constantly going through rounds of layoffs.
You should know that they happen to be profitable. They get about They make about 7% a year. They just don't make.
But not in their current form. That's why they have to undergo layoffs and rounds of when you have to cut staff. It's not something that people want to do. It's out of corporate greed. They're trying to get back to the heady days of 20% profits that newspapers used to make.
They are profitable, and if they weren't greedy, they would be happy with 7%. I would be happy if I could get 7% right now in the market or in a CD. The fact is, these oligarchs always want more.
And I'd like to get back to the credibility issue. Yeah. What Ian was saying about credibility and the internet somehow leading to us losing credibility, I'd just like to remind us that we all trusted in the New York Times and the LA Times and the Washington Post as we marched up to war looking for these weapons of mass destruction.
Absolutely.
So we can overly depend on these very large institutions and just assume that they are more credible because they are the LA Times or the Washington Post. We're all people who have brains.
Let me also.
Yeah, but without them, I think I actually prefer a BBC, and that's what most countries have. At least something that's a public asset that is more answerable to the public than to the shareholders. But the direction that we're heading in, depending upon the diversity of the internet, will be, I think, a free-for-all with a group of Glenn Becks and Alex Joneses. Because what scares me about the American people and about the dumbing down of America is people believe the stupidest thing. I'm at Pacifica, where they're starting to sell 9/11 and all of this lunatic conspiracy, and Alex Jones is now talking about the tornadoes in Oklahoma being a part of a government program for weather wars. I mean,
chemtrails.
This is the kind of I fear that we're going to reinforce stupidity
But I think what they're taking
by having no
objection to is,
level of credibility.
Your implication, though, is that credibility and being a digital media portal is the two are mutually exclusive. Like you can't be online and have credibility. And hello, the Young Turks.
Right.
Young Turks.
I would like to pile on that point because I think that's the key point. Right now, I mean, I think my point is right. I think 15 years from now, there won't be very many print newspapers. That doesn't mean there won't be many LA Times and Chicago Tribunes. But if they are surviving, they will be smaller, they'll be online. And so will all of Sharon's other voices. And our challenge is to find a way to be credible online, to have we're working with the Media Consortium, which is a way to give, some verification. I mean, that's one of the values of the LA Times. Right. If they go out and report a story, we are trained to believe that they're putting their best foot forward, that there's some truth in that. We have to do the same thing with online media. And it's a big problem, but it's solvable. And I would rather see us work on that problem than squabbling about the Koch brothers. If they want to buy
I think that's ultimately the
100
issue
LA Times, they can.
To me, I look at the sale of the LA Times and I'm almost like, well, it might hasten the demise and, push us more quickly into the future of digital media. Like, how do we make it profitable, I'm always trying to find the bright side, but...
Yeah, so are we, I think.
And I think that in time, journalistic standards will be developed for this new media, just like they were developed 150 years ago for the old media. I think it will happen naturally.
But one thing we have to be really careful about is that we don't lose sight of the fact that the 6 or 7 main companies that control the media right now, Viacom, Disney, Comcast, Fox, Time Warner, and I forget what the other ones are, but hopefully not the Koch brothers, that they are going to they have been trying to affect something called net neutrality, which is the ability of Dick and Sharon and you and Ian and me with my own blog on WordPress, should I want to start one, to be able to access the internet for free. If they do what they've done to radio and TV and print, and they get rid of net neutrality, then there's going to be a charge, and it's going to be based on the ability to pay. And all the people that don't have that kind of money behind them are going to have slower speeds and whatever else they can do on the internet to decrease your voice. So it's very important that we pay attention to the fate of net neutrality and that we contact our congresspeople and our senators and let them know that we support it.
And that will be the end of, if that's our last frontier of freedom in terms of the electronic commons. If net neutrality goes commercial, and all of our information then will be corporatized, and that, of course, is the great fear. But look who just got appointed to be the head of the FCC. There's a wonderful woman that was up that should have got the job. So citizens are going to have to really pay attention to this final frontier, whether we lose that or not. That's not to say that I still don't understand on the internet how you sort out the wheat from the chaff. There's no, everybody is their own navigator. That's the problem.
That's education. And I think these two things are tied hand in hand, media and education. The same way the corporations have gotten control of media, they're now trying to get a hold of education. And, if you look at the education system in America, the public education system in America was started to provide workers for factories. So it is being said that there's going to be a 3-tier education system. Private schools for the 1%, the kids of the 1%, charter schools for, maybe the lower managerial classes, and the public schools where the special needs kids, the behavior problem kids, and the low performing kids will get dumped to be the serfs that work in the McDonald's.
Well,
what about the Christian schools?
But on Ian's point,
Christian schools are going to be. What do you think's happening in Oklahoma? They've cut the education budget 30% in the last 6 years because the Christian right, which controls the Republican Party in Oklahoma, believe in homeschooling.
Exactly.
There's a tremendous crisis in education in this country. Gets back to the point I'm making about
how do you what he's
what
saying
is real anymore?
How do you determine that if you don't have media literacy?
But it's a crisis on many fronts, and at the root of it is civic engagement.
That's right.
And being involved in your community, and just because you're involved in your community doesn't make you a communist. I know that everyone has this patriotic, bootstrapping individualist image of America on the right, and that's not to say that entrepreneurship isn't in our DNA, but we're human.
Well, but you don't have to be a communist. You can be a community organizer.
But you can.
So
but
we're in a new age,
On Ian's point about the verifiability of the reputation, credibility of online media. Well, it isn't as though there weren't scurrilous newspapers. What about Sun Myung Moon's Washington Times, the op-ed page of the Wall Street Journal? William Loeb's paper in Manchester, New Hampshire. There's been lots of papers that.
It's true, but if, for example, the Associated Press, which most people get their bottom line information, that's how it starts, and then they report around that and add depth to it with their bureaus around. If the Associated Press got things wrong on a daily basis, if they get anything wrong, they get pulled over. Right. That's the point. That is what it is, a self-regulating process to some extent about what is real. And it's true, as Sharon pointed out, you can't depend upon the New York Times because they got had by the Bush administration. Not the whole paper, but we remember some of their more egregious reporting about being cheerleaders for the Gulf War, and that leads to the point about Obama going after the press. We need, if there'd been more aggressive press, then we would have been saved a massive disaster, which was the Iraq War, which has done incalculable damage to America's economy and its position abroad. So we obviously need an aggressive press, and we don't have it at the moment. But we're talking about whether or not we have any press at all.
Absolutely. And
that's a whole other subject,
and
a scary prospect.
My high hope is that we can organize ourselves online the same way the Associated Press organized itself principally in press. You can imagine that people would get together and have a stamp of approval, and you can only belong to this online network. If you're meeting some kind of standard, some kind of independently verifiable standards.
Right.
But that's the problem with the internet. You can put up a most scurrilous headline, and it takes about a week for it to get shot down. But if there's a headline saying that Obama is involved with a plot to attack the United States from the dark side of the moon, a lot of people will believe that.
That's true. That's true.
And it'll take a few days before
that happens.
astronomers to point out.
How do you fight that, though?
That happens.
It's like life.
That's right. People will lie.
People lie, and you have to navigate reality.
But this is what
the lens of your perspective.
What he's speaking about is a direct result of the Telecommunications Act of 1996, which deregulated media and caused there to be more media consolidation. Before that, or I should say right after that, that afforded Clear Channel the ability to buy 1,000 radio stations across this country and put Rush Limbaugh on all of them. And I was just in North Carolina last month, and I listened to some of these stations, and you would be amazed. People in liberal California would be amazed at the kind of stuff that's going out over the airwaves there. And that's why people believe that.
And the airwaves here. I've heard of Rush Limbaugh.
Right,
People listen
right,
to
but-
Rush Limbaugh in Southern California.
No,
But these religious
in
channels
some areas, that's all you can get.
and that and the fact that the Texas school department, the Texas Board of Education is
Well, I
really
think that's another story.
Okay.
But bottom line, I think we all are coming to the point that regardless of what we do as media professionals, there's got to be some directive from government. And in order to get legislation that will affect our problems here,
Right.
we need the
There
people
used
to
to be,
stand
you know.
up and pressure our politicians.
Right.
We need to have a Telecommunications Act that,
Right.
breaks up these big conglomerates.
And there was a fairness doctrine, which when Reagan got rid of the fairness doctrine, the right wing were ready, they hit the ground running, and that's how Limbaugh and all these people happened. So if in the absence of any government control, you end up with the kind of people that the powerful plutocrats who own the media want as their spokespeople. They don't want people like you and me. They don't want liberals out there complaining about what's wrong with America. They just want to sow all of these delusions about all this happy talk about the greatest country on the earth while they steal us all blind.
exactly,
That's right.
exactly.
And when you consider that the media establishes the foundation for democracy, if it continues to go the way that it's going, we are really going to be in major crisis. And unfortunately, maybe that's what it's going to take to get the civic engagement that you're talking about.
Gotta get
Ian-
worse before it gets better.
Yeah, it's got to get worse before
Oh,
it
I've
gets
heard
better.
that before. And it keeps getting worse.
It keeps getting worse
Yeah.
and it hasn't gotten better.
Yeah, yeah. You know, when we look at the crisis in education and pretty much all of our public institutions, and then I think about, well, for the past 30 years in the state of California, in 25 years, we have built 23 prisons. The 100 years before that, we'd only built 12 prisons. All of this happened right under our noses with papers like the LA Times. But because we don't have diversity of opinion, because we don't have ethnic diversity, this was happening and it's impacting all of us. Now, our budget for higher education in the state of California, now the budget for that is lower than the budget for prisons. So all of this was going on with these big institutions, this credible media, right there, the Los Angeles Times. Maybe we do need to reach a crisis.
And the punchline in their 23 prisons built in those years is we built one University of California
university.
campus.
Yeah, and we're spending more per prisoner to house a prisoner every year in California than we are to educate a student.
Well, if it's like 30 or 40,000 to house a prisoner, and then
8,000 to educate.
no, but then you look at like what people actually earn as income in this country. Like the median household income is less than $50,000 for two earners.
That's right.
So you could be out earning money, working a job, a full-time job, making $25,000 a year, or you could be not working at all and be a prisoner and have everything paid to the tune of 30
Oh my
Sounds
God,
like
did
a
you
good deal.
actually just make an argument for why it's good to be a prisoner? I don't even want to get into that with
I
you.
don't think that's what
No,
you
no,
said.
That was my
Because
argument.
I have heard people say that they have a roof over their head, they have 3 meals, they
No,
have...
the argument for me is that the state of the income disparity is such that you could be a prisoner and we would be paying to house you, and yet someone could be working full time and an upstanding citizen and make less than what it costs to house a prisoner. So when we talk about a plutocracy, the effects are far-reaching. You have the crisis in education, the crisis in the incarceration rates, but the income disparity, the concentration of wealth in the hands of the few, exacerbates all these problems on different fronts. And so just to wrap everything up, I think that we need to ask viewers to become involved in your communities at any level. Nothing is too little, and we need you. I would think that everyone here can agree.
Right. The idea that people don't vote because the politics are so horrible is a self-defeating argument. People just have to start engaging in, the establishment wants us to be passive consumers. The challenge is to become active citizens. And that means everybody has to wake up, get involved, and particularly with climate change. If you have children and grandchildren, forget about it. So maybe, we got rid of nuclear weapons, or at least most of them, and at the danger of a nuclear war. It's possible that we can turn things around.
Thank you for coming on today.
Thank you.
That's our
Thank you, Lauren.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks for watching. I'm Lauren Windsor. Get pulled in to the undercurrent.
My state of mind, have I been hypnotized to believe in lies with the monologue, questioning God like Habakkuk, cause the odds keep stacking up. Where is the illumination for the human nation?